Hello, folks. Today we're joined by a very talented builder within the Empyrion community. He's a major faction contributor to several factions, including Xerax, Polaris, UCH, Wastelanders, and the Brotherhood of Far, to name a few. He's also the creator of the Ravagers faction. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one, the only, Don2k7. How are you, Don?
I'm good, thank you. You?
Good. So what's in the name Don2k7?
So it stems back to 2007 when I actually started. Originally, I was playing on a PlayStation uh, 3, I think it was then, and it's the first time I gamed online. And somebody basically called me Don, and then obviously I tied in the year with when I started gaming in it, and I've used it ever since.
Okay. So how did you get into Empyrion?
So we were playing the guys that I used to game with. We were playing a lot of Armor 2 and then Armor 3, and they wanted a break, and we tried several other games, and then we tried Imperium. So this is really odd, right? Some people might think this is odd. So we tried Imperium, and the very first time we played Imperium, didn't like it. Really didn't like it. Um, because obviously didn't read anything, didn't play the tutorial, didn't. We just dived straight in on a co-op. Um, bumbled around, died a lot, then worked out how to make some bricks and survive a bit. And then they got bored and they went off and played something else. And I was like, actually, this has got a lot of potential. And then I started looking at the workshop and I was like, really excited that people had built the stuff on the workshop. So then it basically stemmed from there. I then went and learned how to play, and then spawned stuff in from the workshop and walked around it in awe, and then basically started like tweaking some builds from other builders, and then eventually started building my own stuff. Um, and then I was trying to look how to do something. I can't remember what it was now, and I stumbled across Spange's video. He was doing a recruitment video. He wanted help to build POIs and stuff for the Brotherhood of Far. And that caught my interest. So I was like, wow, that's really cool. Build some POIs and ships and stuff, and actually get them added to the game, which was how I ended up on Spange's Discord and ended up contributing to the Brotherhood of Far.
Nice.
And basically it went from there.
Yeah, I sort of had the same thing going on when I first started playing the game. It didn't appeal to me, but later it clicked.
Yeah,
So, so suffice to say that survival was the bigger draw for you. That creative was something that you realized later on.
yeah, definitely, yeah. And the more I got into the game, the more I started building, and then obviously I had a conversation with Hummel after the Brotherhood of Far were added to the game, which then led on to some UCH stuff, and then I ended up in a conversation with Script HD and ended up helping him a little bit with the Wastelanders, and then I ended up doing a lot of ARC stuff with Hecken to help get ARC into the game. Yeah, and it's just led from there really,
Yeah,
and then I got to the point where I was like, I want to make my own faction, something different, which is how the Ravagers came about.
wonderful. So have you played builder games before, or is this your first?
This is probably my first, I'll say, true builders game in that sense.
Yeah.
Like if you've ever played, have you ever played like the old DayZ mod for Armor?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So I've built bases and bits and bobs in that, but essentially this is my first true building game. I've never played Minecraft which is probably the only other example I could think of where you build stuff from what I've seen. Yeah, so yeah, this is the only really building game like this I've played in that sense.
So why Empyrion and not Space Engineers?
I guess probably I came across Imperium first.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of people play Space Engineers, but that was after I started playing Imperium, and I looked at what they were doing, and I was like, yeah, I'll stay with Imperium, you know.
Too much clang. And so that's what they call like a collision is a clang.
Oh right, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um.
Um,
So a little bit of sci-fi influence here. We can see some 40K themes, some vibes. What other
yeah.
sci-fi themes have influenced you with your builds?
So Warhammer 40,000, and obviously subdivisions of Games Workshop like Battlefleet Gothic, which explains some of the ship designs, or to a point. Some Star Trek stuff,
Yeah.
and then some of it has been, I'll say, like a lot of playing around in creative, and until I find something I like the look of. I dread to think how many builds have ended up in what I class as the graveyard. You know, for one reason or another. Either I didn't like the shape of the hull, or you build it to the point of testing it, and it doesn't do what I wanted it to do in that sense. From a player perspective, obviously building for NPC, OPVs and POIs is obviously different, because you don't need to worry about how it handles as a player because you won't be flying it.
Yeah. What sci-fi theme would you say is your favorite?
Sci-fi theme, sorry, was that?
Yeah, sci-fi theme or sci-fi universe, if you will.
Oh, oh, that's a tough one. This is going to cause some controversy. It would it would probably be a toss up between either Star Trek or Warhammer 40K, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, because I grew up playing actual with Warhammer as a kid, so
Hmm.
between that and watching the older Star Trek, obviously I have seen Star Wars. Don't get me wrong, I haven't attempted a Star Wars build yet. That might come one day, but that's I guess it stems from childhood in that sense.
Wow. No Star Wars, really. That's surprising.
Yeah, I haven't attempted a Star Wars. I did attempt. Well, I built the hull. I never got any further with it. Like the Doninger from Expanse, I did the outer hull, but never outfitted it. You know,
Yeah.
that's another shell one in the graveyard.
Has anyone within the build community influenced you?
Definitely yes. Yeah, because I obviously I've been lucky enough to talk with Spange and Jay Randall and Excalibur and Script and Heck and several other builders, but you know I have been influenced in a way by either stuff that they've built, and ultimately what they've contributed either to the workshop or the game itself. So I guess a classic example would be Randall's Leviathan Supercarrier
Hmm.
was the first, I'll say, proper build I spawned in creative and walked around it for probably a good 2 or 3 hours just in awe at the build and the detail and the block work, and was like, you know, Jesus, some people built this, the amount of hours it must have taken and invest in something like that is unreal.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and Vermilion is a classic example. So obviously I looked at Vermilion's construction sets and took a lot of how he laid it out in sense, to make sure, you know, part A will connect to part B, and if you want it to connect to part C, you might need D as a connector between them, kind of thing. So, you know, I took a lot of influence from Vermilion when I was doing my very first build, well, and subsequent build kits, you know,
Yeah.
because I think even a build kit is a slightly separate art form to building like just one ship or one POI, because there you've got to make sure all of the parts to a point will go together to create multiple POIs, you know.
Absolutely.
But yeah, but there's obviously other things as well. Um, you know, so when I did like the UCA ships, I wanted to stay true to, I'll say the Titan is the only real example I had to go on. So you'll notice a lot of, if you were to look at any of the UCH stuff I built ship-wise, you'll notice a lot of similarities between my builds and like a lot of the key features that are on the Titan, for example.
Yeah.
And the same with the Polaris. You got the freighter, the heavy freighter. Oh, that's the light freighter. So the light freighter over here, not only have you got the heavy influence of the Vermilion original build, you know, with the angled nacelles and the color palette and the overall shape at the back.
Hmm.
You've then got, I'll say, my bit with the big cargo box on the front with the front landing pads. But you know, not only am I trying to keep in uh, continuity with how the other Polaris ships look, you know, that obviously stems from, I'll say, probably his original vision for them.
Yeah.
You know, so that, I don't want to use the word copy, but you know, if you're
Emulate.
building, yeah, if you're building or adding to pre-existing stuff that's already in game, you know, you want that continuity so somebody can see it and instantly recognize that, say in this case, oh, that's a Polaris ship,
Yeah.
you know, regardless of the builder. So that's, you know, I guess he should be flattered that people want to emulate his stuff. The same with other builders, I guess. You know, obviously everything I submit to vanilla, you know, the same as the workshop, I always give credit to people, even down to, you know, like Alessia with his LCDs, or Salustakor if I've used any of his, or you know, Randall because I use the same color palette as his Europa,
Yeah.
you know. So I always give credit, and if anybody, you know, and I say this to anyone, if you look at my build and you realize that I haven't credited, you know, you for something, then just hit me up and I'll, you know, it's an oversight and I'll add you. Because I think that's the other big thing as well, is it's easy to either not forget, but it's easy to overlook things if you're pulling ideas and inspiration, or color palettes, or different LCDs from all over the place. You know, when you actually go back to put it on the workshop, you can easily probably maybe miss somebody, or you might look at something and think, oh, that's a Salustakor LCD, and then it transpires that it wasn't. It was built by some, you know, done by somebody else, kind of thing.
Right.
So, but I always think it's important to credit people.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um,
so what part of the build process is most time consuming for you?
Probably texturing.
Texturing?
Yeah. Especially on the larger builds, or if you're um I'll say either painting something that you haven't painted in that style before. Like the first time I painted a Xerax build, I essentially had several existing builds spawned in next to it, so I could flick back and forth and look at how, and the construction set, you know, to see how, I'll say, things should be textured really. So you've got that continuity to a point in the you know, the style, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the other thing there is like, so when I built the Ravagers, for example, I went on a massive, I'll say, building spree. So basically all I did was build Ravagers stuff to get enough builds to get the faction into the game. So, by the time you're several builds in, the color palette and how I want it textured and everything is second nature. But then when you stop and down tools and then go and build, say, a new Polaris build, then it's back to square one, and it's like, oh, I better have some existing Polaris stuff spawned in to make sure I get that right look and continuity, for that faction. Because you don't want to, spray a Polaris build and it actually looks like a yellow version of a Xerax build.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And so, texturing, no issues with LCD work. It's
To be honest, I do the bare minimum with LCDs. I heavily rely on existing LCD, but
yeah,
the guys that do the LCDs already. So
outsource.
salute. Yeah. Sometimes there's existing stuff on a workshop I can use. So like obviously Salute Core, Entei, he's got some. I think he's made his own, but I've used a couple of his before. And Alessia, and again, some of the stuff has been out there already. Some stuff I've actually said, look, I'm building this. I don't suppose you could help out and make some LCDs for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, LCDs, unless it's really simple, no, I'll tap out and outsource it if possible.
Wonderful. So what part of the build process do you find is easiest?
I guess it helps if you've got an idea of what you want to build in mind, and kind of say, even if it's a mental image of how you want it to look and how you want it laid out inside.
Yeah.
If you've got that, then the build is easier to a point than, I'll say, building blind in that sense. But the thing that obviously helps with some of the building is the construction sets, because that initially speeds up the process to a point. Than I'll say building something completely new from scratch in that sense. Yeah, so some of the harder things to, I'll say, emulate if you're doing like an inspired build is some of the shaping or the block work, because either because of the scale, you can't achieve the scale to be a true replica, because obviously yourself, some of these ships in reality would be like miles long,
Yeah.
and we're limited in Empyrion on that one, or the block shapes don't exist, or because you're scaling it, you then have to make compromise in some of the shaping to a point, but still so it's proportionate, because there's certain ships, so like Battlefleet Gothic, for example, these inspired Battlefleet Gothic ships would be like, in reality, in Empyrion would be huge. So again, like when I built the Gloriana, there wasn't even, because it was never in Battlefleet Gothic properly, there was only pictures of it in a book. I've seen a couple of 3D printed ones on eBay. So in essence, to try and build it and keep it in proportion is another interesting point, I think. But there's other builders out there who've made 40k builds as well. So
I love the theme. I love 40k. Wow.
yeah, but then like the spoiler, which is just an empty hull.
Yeah.
The Planet Killer, and a Grand Cruiser, I think the third one is. They're all empty hulls that I built with the intention of outfitting, but never got round to it. And then I was talking to somebody on Discord, and they were on about Battlefleet Gothic and stuff. And I said, "Oh, You know, I built them because I couldn't find anybody else had built them on the workshop. When I was trying to build something different, you know, rather than like another Chaos Cruiser or another Imperium Cobra kind of thing. So that's how they came about. But I was talking to somebody and they said about it, and I said, "Oh, I've got these empty shells. You know, you're welcome if you want to use it for yourself." Or and then they said, "Oh, why don't you put it on the workshop?" So that's how they ended up on the workshop. You know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So texturing is the big con for you, and then you're fine with block work. Do you feel that flows well?
Most of the time, yeah. There have been a few occasions where I've been swearing at the screen because, you know, you're part way down the side of a build and you want to transition angles, and the block doesn't exist at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
You know, so then it's like, do I essentially rip out half the side of a ship and re-angle it so the blocks that do exist fit, or do I just slam some block detail in there to help break up the surface? And I guess depending on the build, predominantly I'll try and not rip out half a ship or half a POI if I can help it, just for the sake of, you know, these 3 blocks don't exist and they would have been helpful, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'll try and transition it a different way, in the sense, you know, even if it's a step up or a slightly different adjustment on the angle, to try and blend it. It just depends what you're building, I guess. But yeah, predominantly for the most part, I'm all right with block work in that sense.
So which of your builds is your least favorite?
Ah, probably some of my earlier stuff, I guess,
Yeah.
purely because
Spot.
obviously A was built a while ago now,
Yeah.
and B, you know, it's easy to look back on something and think, oh, I've learned this and this since then, you know. But that build I haven't updated, either because it's not really viable anymore, or just because, you know, say it's for vanilla and I want it in Reforged, but it would be too much work to pull it apart and refit it in that sense. So yeah, some of my earlier stuff I'm not that keen on now, but again, I look at it as like a learning curve. You know, my very first builds were like flying bricks, so there's no way they were going. You know, there's no
Yeah.
way they were going on the workshop kind of thing. But as I've spoken to people before, you know, other people seem to have similar experiences, in the sense of, you know, the first few builds look terrible. You look back on them now and you think, oh, what was I thinking when I built that? But it's all part of that learning curve.
Do you have them in your library? You ready to spawn
No,
them in?
no, no,
No.
no, 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 no. They were honestly, they've been binned. They're
uh,
never to see the light of day again,
been scrubbed, huh?
ever. Yeah, yeah. They've been officially and well and truly scrapped, never to
Ah.
see the light of day again, because
Yeah.
they were not pretty. And a couple of them, to be fair, didn't survive their first fight. You know,
Well, that's
but I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had that experience.
yeah. But that's the sort of thing that you want to hold on to though, so you could show that progression.
Yeah, I mean, I have had a couple of people say, even looking at the workshop releases, they can see the progression from like my first, say, Brotherhood or UCH build. They can see the transition, an improvement, I'll call it, you know, up
Hmm.
to my newest releases, in that sense.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of people say that to me. So you know, to a point you can see the transition just from the workshop. But honestly, that early stuff, that's terrible.
Yeah, I could definitely see it as well too. But um, yeah, you're definitely prolific, sort of behind the scenes with some of the faction contributions, and it's kind of
Yeah,
one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight you is because that sort of thing that goes unsung, um, uh, like the faction contributors just don't get the recognition I feel that they deserve. So
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, there's several great builders out there who do have either contributed a lot to the game and or are still contributing a lot behind the scenes. But the only time you would ever see that it predominantly is like if you actually go to the forums and look at the submission pages.
yeah,
And to be fair, unless you're a builder submitting something, the odds are you wouldn't go there and look. Or some people I've spoken to didn't even know even now didn't even know the forums existed. You know, even now. So
yeah,
it's a bit of an eye opener in that regard. Um, yeah. So and regardless of whether you're making content, yeah, I know it obviously is a little bit different if you're making content for vanilla to Reforged, or if you were making something for Star Salvage or another mod out there, you know, because say the mod creators said, "Oh, can I have some help from the community making X, Y, Z?" You know, but generally, yeah, there's a lot of great builders out there who've contributed a lot who don't seem to, you know, I'll say get the acknowledgement that they would compared to being featured in a weekly workshop video or having something at the top of the most popular for the week or 3 months or 6 months or all time kind of thing,
yeah.
you know.
I agree with
And
that.
I'm not saying how you know, I'm not saying that the you know, the guys that add content to the game are better than the workshop. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, you know, they seem to be highlighted more because they're using the workshop in that sense.
Right.
Whereas a lot of the guys building to submit stuff to the game, you know, the vast bulk of them, they build it, they submit it to the game, they give credit where needed or and due for things they've pulled from other people, and then it gets reviewed and gets added, and that's the end of it. You know, for the most part, because I know, for example, Stellar Titan, you know, he's got some amazing builds in game, the UCH stuff, and the Talon'Ar. There's a few Talon'Ar builds. I think they're in. Um, Now he has put a few of the builds. He's basically submitted them and put them on the workshop. But you know, there's a lot of guys out there that submit stuff but don't put it on the workshop because they think, well, I've added it. You know, it'll be in the game,
Hmm.
kind of thing. So then it goes in, and then it's, I guess, waiting for somebody to come across it and go, oh, I've not seen this POI before, or I've not seen this ship before, kind of thing. You know.
Yeah. It's it's one thing to be able to fly around the universe in a pretty ship, but you want to have a high quality destination to travel to as well. So
Yeah. Well, that leads on to something else because like for the homeworlds, obviously in my mind, if nothing else, you know, if you're going to a faction homeworld, you want it to be unique.
mhm.
You want it to be filled with one-off POIs, for example, or several, or even a few, you know, depending on how advanced that faction is in terms of content for the game. But I kind of think, you know, if you're going to the Xerox homeworld, which is why I built the POIs I mentioned before we started this interview, you know, you want unique stuff to see. But then if you go to the Polaris homeworld, you want different unique stuff to see. If you go to the Ravagers again, you want different unique stuff to see. So then it gives players a purpose to actually go and visit all of these places because there's going to be cool, unique stuff that isn't on any other planet.
Yeah.
That's how I envision it, which is why the whole subject of capital cities came up with the devs a little while ago. So obviously I've built 10, I think 10 capital cities now. One for each faction. Well, except the Xerax, obviously one for each house. But and Stella's built 2, to my knowledge. I think they've both been submitted. I'm pretty sure they have. I'd have to go and double check, but I'm pretty sure both of these have been submitted. All of mine have been submitted, but they've not been added yet. But again, one-off unique POIs only for that faction's homeworld. So that's something different. So even if, say, so the remit for that was they had to have like a fleet HQ, a central government building, and I think a spaceport was the third thing. But outside of that, the rest of it you were flexible. So even if you see some similarities, they're massively different in terms of the layout. I've tried to make each one different in terms of layout. Obviously, then you've got the own faction overall design. So if you go to the even if you go to like the Zeno capital C, it will obviously look remarkably different from say the Serdu because of the slight differences in build style and color palette and like even the lighting effects,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. But again, that then gives players something else unique to go and check out on said faction homeworld. Because as you say, it's all well and good. You can have like a AAA rated, all singing, all dancing ship, but if you're flying around the galaxy looking at the same POIs all the time, you only have to travel so far before you start running into similar or identical POIs.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is a pretty big galaxy for the most part. So it's nice to go somewhere, I think, and see something different. And I feel, you know, something like a faction homeworld should be very unique, personally.
So which of
In
your I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, go on.
Which of your builds is your favorite?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess my favorite player build that I've done is probably that's either it's a close call, I guess, between either my Jarul carrier or my Eradicator battle tank.
Really?
Yeah, they're probably my favorites at the moment. Either or. So if I had to pick one, I guess probably probably the Jarul carrier if I had to pick one or the other, purely because it's obviously more functional and has more variant of uses over, a HV battle tank.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's a bit of an all-round workhorse for me. I can lug all my stuff around in it. I can live out of it if I need to.
Mm.
If I outfit it and upgrade it, it can be used in combat. Although I wouldn't, personally, I don't like to, throw all my eggs in one basket and risk it all like the roll of a dice. I'm not going to go try and take on a Tavera with all my livelihood sat in the back. Do you know what I mean? That's a bit of a gamble because if you lose or the
Yeah.
game throws a curveball and you end up crashing or, you know, something goes wrong, you could lose it all. You know.
Yeah.
So as much as I love, the aspects of combat, I would rather do it in a dedicated combat ship. So if I lose it, I can hopefully stick my thumb out and get a pickup to get home, and then either build a new one or get some help to kill it, and then limp my wreck home and repair it. But everybody, this is the beauty of a sandbox game, isn't it? Is because you can, to your point, play your own way.
Yeah.
So if you want a base somewhere on a planet or in space with a different ship for each different job, if you go out and farm the resources, you can do that. Last season I did a solo run compared to the previous seasons I played on the server, and I made my first couple of 100 mil basically just scrapping ships from the colonist scrapyards.
Hmm.
you know I'd go I got to the point where I could go there, I could buy 3 or 4 in one go, um carry my, I'll say, emergency package, so I could basically just get them to the point so I could dock them to my carrier, and then I'd drag them home, and then basically strip them down to the last sensor switch, LCD, the whole shebang, so fold it up entirely, and then sell what I could back to the colonists, and what I couldn't sell anywhere, I would essentially then decon down and either sell off the parts I could sell or recycle into something I could sell. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for the first part of that season, I basically did very little combat. I ran a few ground POIs, but I was essentially either mining or scrapping stuff to make money. And then obviously I got to the point where I got my combat ship in, and then, you know, I was then salvaging stuff from dead ships and selling to the colonists rather than buying scrap ships and you know. But that's, you know, so I was making more money through just trading than actual just continually going out and hunting stuff to kill in that sense. But then I know guys, and you know, that'll be happily, they'll go to a planet and they'll like spend a couple of days just running every POI on the planet to get the loot.
Yeah, we got a couple of those. That's I would say that's Mubear on our faction.
Yeah.
So I have the Eradicator here. The carrier you mentioned. I don't know if I spawned that one in or not.
Hang on. I've lost where you are on the map.
I'm over by the Eradicator. Yeah. So between the two builds, you mentioned the Eradicator and then also a carrier. Not sure if I spawned that one in. I got the I have the Lupus. Don't know if I spawned the other one in.
Oh yeah, there's the Eradicator. Let's have a look. Oh, wrong button. Hang on.
Yeah, you might have
Don't
to,
know.
might have to spawn that in.
Yeah, I'll come back here a bit. So, JH. Oh, there we go. Dual Carrier Mark 1.
Okay, let's see where you got to.
Uh, okay, I've managed to spawn 2 in, one on top of the other. That's helpful.
Nice.
I don't know. It won't let me destroy one.
Okay, that's fine. I'll get it. So to find out where you got off to.
Behind the Gloriana Mark 2,
Okay.
and then up a tiny bit.
Ah. Okay, yeah, I didn't spawn this one.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. It threw up an error and spawned one on top of the other.
So this has sort of like yeah, it's kind of got like some vibes from a warbird.
Yeah, like I say, so originally I was using a refit of Jay Randall's Nemesis battle carrier I refitted for Reforged from Vanilla. But as you know, the season progressed, I quickly realised that it needed to be bigger to carry around my stuff essentially. So you know, I refitted and refitted and refitted it, and then I got to a point where I was like, you know, I had a really reasonable combat carrier that could essentially take down a Tavera, but the hangar wasn't then big enough to lug round my combat SV, the Eradicator battle tank, my miner, my salvager, my high G miner, you know.
Yeah.
So then I went on the hunt and I I found the dual carrier. I was looking at, you know, different Star Trek ships and some other sci-fi stuff, and I saw the Warbird and I kind of fell in love with the shape, especially the curved wing, you know, the double wings with the curved top and everything. So hence I built this, but I made sure that the hangar was big enough to fit everything in that I carry around. So I don't know. Have you seen Armitage Rogues? Sorry if I haven't pronounced that right. Kodiak Combat SV.
But I'm sure I have. I would recognize it if I saw it, I'm sure.
Okay, so I have a refit of that I use as my main like endgame combat SV.
Yeah.
Which is that one. I've got a refit version, but essentially that's the workshop version. So I wanted to make sure that the hangar essentially was big enough for all of my stuff. So I can get my Eradicator battle tank in the front, and then there's space for the Kodiak behind it. I can tuck my little miner and salvager off to the side. On one side, I
Yeah.
can then get the Hell Raider. I can't remember the name of the person who built it, but I slightly tweaked it. But the Hell Raider High GSV on the other side, and then I've still got some space in the back if I needed to lug around some other builds, you know. And then ultimately, I've got a spare landing pad on top, and I guess if I really got desperate, I've got the space in the wing, in the gaps between the wings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
I think
yeah.
that
So
I
the
think that Tall Shiar would be proud. uh,
yeah,
it's a pretty bird, pretty warbird.
yeah. So again, this is the workshop version, which starts out at 2.1, and it can obviously be upgraded and upgraded and upgraded. So potentially you could have like 10 ox and depending on the server settings, 10 quants, and then whatever weapons and shields and extra thrust would allow you with that.
Yeah.
But I essentially built it as my main carrier. My personal version's up to the Mark V because of the refits and the additions and stuff. But this is the main workshop version because I know obviously everybody might want to make their own tweaks, for example. And my own version doesn't even have the LCDs for the lifts. You know, they were only put in just for the workshop release, so people had some idea on where they were going. You know, so one of the things I learned, which I try and do in, I'll say any CV I use that has a hangar or has a rather lengthy run to a pilot seat, either in a battle bridge or a bridge, is, and I picked this up from somebody else, so credit to whoever that was, I can't remember, but I'm assuming other people do it. I have a bug out seat just inside the hangar door.
Oh
So
yeah.
if I'm on a planet or I'm somewhere and things go wrong, or you know, you're doing something, and the next thing you know, you've got a missile destroyer crept up on you and he's shooting at you. I make sure I purposely put in a bug out seat. So in this instant, you know, I haven't got to go the full length of the hangar to get to the pilot seat in the battle bridge.
Yeah.
That's a personal thing that I picked up from somebody else that I do in ships like this, purely for the reason that I don't want to, you know, get caught with my pants down, essentially.
Yeah, it's. I think a number of us do that.
Yeah,
I have that on a couple of my builds. It just, it's kind of, common sense. Like,
yeah,
after running drone space so many times and, getting popped, you're gonna learn some things, right?
yeah,
You need quick access to control stations. Whether that's in your hangar or at your bridge, and you need a
yeah,
drone hatch to get there fast because you could lose your ship. You got desync nullifiers out there flying around ready to pop you. You know?
yeah. The universe is well, the galaxy is a dangerous place.
Yeah.
Nowhere is ever truly safe, is what I tell people when they ask, you know, oh, is it safe to log off here? Well, no, is ever truly safe, but you know, it's probably a little bit safer logging off near a UCH in a UCH sector than it is, you know, in drone space or above a Xerax planet. Unless you're friendly with the Xerax, then you know, who knows? But because that's the other thing as well, isn't it? You know, when you're partway into a game and you decide and you work on your rep on who you want to be friendly with and who you don't really care about, and then you've got the guys that you're blatantly hostile with, and they'll shoot you on sight, and you'll happily wage war with them. You know, everybody's different in that sense. Although some of the rep obviously has a knock-on effect. So if you go to war with Polaris, that's obviously going to affect you with colonists, for example. But
Mhm.
you can easily fix it by doing the missions. But you know, a lot of people see Xerax as the main bad guy in that sense.
Yeah, that's true.
outside of Legacy, and obviously, but yeah. So
So you've made a number of contributions to Xerax. What are some of your other contributions to Empyrion, be it faction, POIs, or otherwise? No-
outside of the Ravagers.
Yeah,
Okay, so obviously Polaris, it's mainly a group of freighters. So you've got, I can't remember the exact blueprint name, but essentially there's several versions of like the light freighters. I'll say maybe the normal, but then the heavy.
yeah,
So there'll be like essentially the same, I'll say rear end, but then you'll have like a cargo variant, an O2 variant, a fuel variant of the light and the heavy, for example. Um, Brotherhood of Far, again, I did some of the more space POIs than Planet, I think. I did do a few small bits on the planet, and then I helped in the live stream with a couple of Spanges builds for the faction. But the main thing with the Brotherhood was actually doing the so in essence with the Brotherhood they buy a lot of their gear from Polaris. So it made sense when I spoke about it with Spange that they would essentially buy Polaris ships, but refitted to their specification. So if you see a if you see a Brotherhood ship, and you think, oh, that looks like a Polaris corvette or destroyer or the big Ilmarian, I think is how you pronounce it. You know, that's because essentially that's what it was originally. It's just been basically repainted and slightly tweaked with their glitz and glamour for that faction. You know,
yeah.
to fit in with the way the history and the lore is written, obviously. Wastelanders, done a few builds for them. Again, like Last Hope settlement or city, however it's worded now, is essentially like a variation of Scripps City. So that's why they look very similar in that sense. You know, ARC, there's several ARC builds because essentially, like I say, I was helping Hecken to bulk out the faction to get enough builds so that the faction could be added to the game. So the in essence, like the Xerax stuff is a little bit more specialist in that sense because I hadn't actually planned to build any Xerax things originally. You know, like I said, the Council and the Palace came about because the first time I ran the Xerax campaign on Spange's server, you know, I got to the home world and it was the vanilla home world with the sector command, which would have seemed like a bit of an anticlimax to the guys who were taking part in the campaign because there was like no, you know, definitive ending in my mind, no true climax and end to the story. If I'd have not built anything and they'd have gone there and they'd have gone, oh, great, looks like another Xerax planet with a sector command, you know,
Yeah.
that just felt like it would have been a little bit of an anticlimax to the weeks that they'd spent playing the campaign. So that's how they came about. And the capitals again was talking with Hamal about how each faction should have like its own capital city, someone a bit unique in that sense. So, but then obviously the Xerax, each house has its own capital. So whether there's a broader plan there for something else to happen with Xerax and Vanilla, I'm unsure of. But either way, each house now has its own capital city. um, yeah. So the I see you spawned in the older the large warp drive over there.
Yeah, yeah. That's I love this thing, man. This is this is crazy.
Yeah.
Very
So somebody on Anvil built a giant core that now sits in the center of Anvil City,
mhm.
or it did the last time I saw it anyway. But anyway, that then stemmed this whole thing about oversized copies of existing things in Imperium. So then I saw Alessia did like I think he did was it a small generator, a fuel tank,
Yeah.
a couple of other things, and then obviously other people jumped on board and started doing bits and pieces as well. So I did the bed, the toilet, and the pentax tank. But the warp drive, to be fair, was the hardest one to build for me.
Yeah.
And then the pentax tank, well, the pentax tank. But because
Curves.
curves, yeah,
Hmm.
curves curves don't necessarily work as well on the little warp drive above it compared to the actual thing. And then with the pentax tank, the angled, I'll say purple bit, you know, in the center there.
Yeah.
That so there's a bit of I'll say interpretation, for want of a better word. But yeah, I actually thought that was a really fun project that actually brought people together, and people chipped in and got involved in, and even was it light CV or CV light 3, the like the square light. Somebody made a CV of the bigger square light that you can have inside the building.
Yeah.
I actually still have that, and I sometimes use that if I'm building in space to help with lighting.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's
it's little
cool.
things.
Yeah, that's cool.
Light 3 CV. Here we go. So this is only fair. Um, Pyro Locter, is that how you pronounce his name?
Uh,
Pro,
Procyon.
s- yeah,
Procyon
sorry
Lotor.
if I've butchered that, but yeah. So this light, I actually use this now, even now in creative, if I'm building in space, to help with the lighting. Because if you build in space, obviously you end up on the dark side of the build, and then the light isn't as good as if you're on the sun side. So I will use this even now sometimes. I'll spawn it in and adjust it to where I'm working to give me better lighting.
Yeah,
So that is an invaluable build for me.
that's
So
hilarious.
credit there. And that all stemmed from building these larger copies of actual deco bits and pieces in game. So yeah, I still use that even now. So
It's
that's a godsend, that, you know.
a whimsical build that turned out to have good function.
Yeah, very good function.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So what else have we got? I see you got several construction sets over there.
Yeah, so you find that the construction sets save a lot of time, massive heaps of
They
time.
help. I don't want to use the term generic, but if you're POI building and you want to turn out, or I'll say speed up the production slightly of, I'll say the more generic POIs, regardless of the faction, then it helps, because you copy and paste the bits together, fill it full of loot and spawners, and outfit it, and it saves you essentially building it from scratch. Plus, it's already pre-textured, uh, pre-shaped to how that faction design is. So in
Yeah,
that sense, it saves time. But when I say generic, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, it doesn't matter on the faction to a point. Every faction to a point has trade stations, supply stations, resupply stations, shipyards. That's what I mean by generic.
yeah,
So in that sense, it can help speed up production if you're trying to churn out a lot of POIs, or even if you're not and you just want to build a bigger POI. Some of the bits obviously, and it's the same with any of the construction sets. The premise of them is, initially, they're to help you build a POI with that faction if you've not built one before, because you've got the color palette, you've got the design, and the look and aesthetics already there. You copy and paste the bits together, and even if you're making a simple, you know, one room building, it's there, rather than you trying to spawn something in and copy build it block by block from scratch. In that sense,
right.
and the other good thing is as well is you can actually, you're not restricted to. Is it me or is it getting dark?
Oh yeah, hold on, let me change that.
Yeah. Um, so you're not restricted to the, I'll say, the rigid design of the kit in that sense. You know, so if you want to build a shipyard, but you want to add turrets to somewhere on the docking arm and there isn't turrets there, you know, it doesn't take a lot to make the custom adjustments that you want in order for, excuse me, to do that.
Okay. So, what other items or features would you like to see added to Empyrion if you had that opportunity?
Oh, well, we finally got crouch, so that ticked that one off the list. That ticked that off. I guess I would really like, excuse me if you're listening, devs. I would really like some more block shapes. I know everybody harks on about it, but particularly like with the introduction of some of the new curved blocks that we got. I actually need a block to. So if you're looking at the block work, the round shapes and pipe category, we got the rounded A, rounded B, rounded ramp A, rounded ramp B left, rounded ramp B right, and rounded edge. They the newer blocks that were added. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have actually used some of those. I've started using the newer blocks that were added in builds, and the thing for me is ideally it would be nice if we could have some more blocks that actually line up with those. You know,
Yeah.
because it's great they line up with each other, but if you want to put a rounded A block with the narrower side, say facing right, and then you wanted to put in I'll say a half block, and then a rounded A block facing narrower side towards the other A block, there's a dip there. That half block isn't as tall as, you know,
Yeah.
it won't sit flush if you do rounded A block, rounded A, you know, as like I'll say a couple of speed humps. I can't think of a better way to describe it.
No,
But
no,
yeah,
I
that
get it.
the half block leaves a little rectangle dip. So in theory, you would then need probably like the thin block to go on top of that, but that's obviously not possible because of the way the blocks go together, you know. Just little things like that. I've noticed a few blocks that I kind of think, you know, and obviously they've done a great job in adding new content and new blocks, don't get me wrong, but you know, I have suggested these as well. But yeah, so there's a few blocks that I've tried to put together and they don't physically go, you know, or line up smoothly, which is great if you want a bit of block texture, block detail that you can then go and texture. But there's been some cases where you actually want that smooth transition and you can't physically have it.
Yeah.
So that, you know, more blocks, please. Always more
Oh
blocks.
yeah, definitely. But
Yeah.
that's actually funny because that's one of the things I appreciate about that rounded ramp. Uh, is that it's like a 3/4 block, and then the last sliver on whatever block it's parked against, I could texture that as a light texture.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. That's what I mean. You know, so
hilarious.
you've got the beauty that it doesn't line up. So as you say, you can do your texturing and add in that extra little layer of detail, so to speak. But you know, you might find a time where you want that smooth transition and the block doesn't exist.
Right. And it would be great, to have those as well. So the more the merrier. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You know,
I get.
the more shapes that we get,
Yeah.
I kind of think the more shapes that we can get, the more it allows us to come up with new shapes, if that makes sense in the bigger picture, you know,
Hmm.
in terms of how you build stuff. And it also helps add different kinds of layering using block work for detail before you even texture, you know. So yeah, always more blocks. After that, I guess I would say walking on ships, but that's probably never going to happen. And I kind of think, do you really need to?
Yeah.
Some would argue, some would argue for, some would argue against. I think it would be nice, but there's probably like as a builder, more blocks. I guess after that, maybe more. I'll call it fluff, but that's predominantly because I build more POIs than player builds. You know, so like more stuff to help enhance POIs visually. You know, and some things you've probably noticed this as well if you build stuff, and I know Reforged is slightly different to vanilla in that aspect, but you know, like you look at the sofa, right? I'll call it the corner sofa. You've got the alien version with the alien guy sat on the chair,
Yeah.
but there's no human version.
Yeah, absolutely.
That kind of thing,
Hmm.
you know. If you've got this particular deco item with an alien sat in it, it would be great if you could have the human equivalent. In that sense, that would be lovely, you know, because there's obviously, if you're say looking at a more rigid faction in terms of the NPC models as well. I know they've added in some more, like the Brotherhood of Far now. They've got their own robed guys, for example. They look quite cool. But if each faction, I'll say, so yeah, after blocks, I'd say NPC variants. You know, so you could say easily distinguish one alien race from another. You know, like in Star Trek, you know, every alien race is clearly different. You know, from Vulcan, although which is obviously more humanoid than anything, but you know, something that would tell them apart easily from other races in that sense is what I'm getting at. So that would be for me blockwork, and then maybe more NPC variants.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, those are great suggestions. Kind of, how I feel about it. I'd also, I'd like to see like life forms, animals and creatures and stuff, like specific to biomes or planets. So that way,
yes,
it would give like a unique feel to exploring different planet types rather than having seen the same thing over and over.
yeah, no, I that's a good point. I do agree with you there. Actually, that's a really good one. Yeah, because you know, if you're on a Kua, you see a leaf cutter. You go to Haven, you see a leaf cutter. But in theory, it would be nice to see, you know,
Something else.
something else, even if it was a similar kind of creature, but something else. In that sense, I mean, I understand that you could go crazy and have thousands of different species across different planets, but even as you say, you know, you go to, well, in Reforged anyway, you know, you're on a Kua, which I think is temperate, you know, and there's a leaf cutter amongst some other things, and then you go to say a tropical planet, and you're probably still going to see the same leaf cutter, you know. So in that sense, yeah, it would be nice in that sense if you could have a little bit more specific planet type biodiversity. That's probably the way to put it, I think.
I gotta say,
That's
Don,
a
like, I'm sorry, go
that's a
ahead.
good one. No,
Yeah.
sorry, I was just gonna say, yeah, I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, this Talon'Ar, this aesthetic is really doing something for me, man. I'm in love with this thing. Like, just the color palette, the combination of textures, geometry. It's all great, man. This is just I'm loving this thing. I would love to see a faction for this.
Yeah. So Talon'Ar are the advanced Talon. Um, this whole kit is based on and bits are cut from essentially Stellar Titans capital city.
Okay.
So he came up with the overall design aesthetics, and he built the capital. Some of the bits are essentially literally copy and pasted off his capital, and then you know D had the spawners and loot and various bits and bobs removed. But um, some of it I've taken like his building and then cut it up essentially, and so like I call it the apartment block.
I'm at the one in the sky. I had to
Yeah.
respawn because it's stuck in the ground was aggravating me.
So the apartment block, I'll say on the back row, more in the center.
Okay.
So essentially, I took his apartment block, the taller one, where you are now, yeah. So that's his original apartment block, and I then cut it up and made a couple of different variants in that sense. So you've got the I'll say the left side and the right side, and then in the middle center section you've got a couple of different variants of the apartment block. Some of the parts are essentially, I'll say, deco items that you would use around the POI, like the angled, I call them fans, or the little glowy diamond things with the ring around them, those kind of things. The pyramid.
Yeah.
I think the largest one he used in the capital, and then I basically crunched it down to give you the smaller variants. So this was a harder POI kit to do in essence because it wasn't built from scratch, and you make it up, not make it up as you go along, but I was using some pre-existing stuff and essentially cutting it up to make variants and doing bits and bobs. But then there his LCDs down there, and then because I wanted some of it to be, I'll say, similar, because they're essentially the advanced Talon, so there is some similarities between the I'll say normal Talon and the advanced in terms of the builds, But so obviously, credit to Stella for the overall aesthetic, the color palette, the design, in essence, and that.
Oh, okay. So he did the color palette
He,
and the textures as well.
yeah.
Okay.
So he basically built the capital from his head, basically, how he envisioned it. He built the capital, and then he wanted a construction set. So I essentially took the capital because that was the only thing I had to go on, carved it up, made some of the construction set from existing bits of the capital, and then, as I say, made some variants, and then made some new parts like the underground sections, and I'll call them defense towers and walls, and the modular buildings, smaller building pieces that are where are we? Bottom left of the kit. They're built essentially mixing his Talon'Ar design and the slight look and feel of the original Talon'Ar, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this kit is obviously slightly different from some of the others, for example. But I to me, I do like the color palette and the design aesthetic, I'll call it. Um, you know,
Yeah. Really,
and
I dig it too.
I can see probably where he drew some influence from for his design. I think don't quote me on it, but I think some of his design ideas came from Protoss from
That's
StarCraft.
I was about to say that. I was about to
Yeah,
say that. I
yeah,
I feel it. It's got
yeah,
Protoss vibes to it. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's where some of the influence came from for
Hmm.
some of the design aspects of it. But again, you know, the capital essentially is a very very cool POI. I'm not sure if it's added yet, but it's definitely been submitted. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, I released this in, you know, to help essentially for anyone who wants to, and for him obviously, if he wants to use bits of it, to essentially build more POIs.
Yeah.
The Serdu is obviously a bit different because that there was a few Serdu builds in game, but they were a little bit aged, and basically Hummel said, essentially using the original writings around them, you know, they could do with a bit of an overhaul and maybe put together a kit so we can build some more POIs to expand the house out a bit. So that's how the Serdu came about.
Yeah.
And again, the same with Abyssal, although that was different slightly. So yeah, the Abyssal was a similar kind of thing, but again, the build style is obviously more. I tried to keep some of, and again with Serdu, I tried to keep some of the original design aesthetics and I'll say pay homage to the original builds, but again, incorporate some of the existing parts of builds that the Xerax have, or what I define that the Xerax have in that sense. If you look at the other houses, a classic example is if you look at the, I call it the pointy corner.
Okay.
Probably not the best way to describe it, but
Yeah.
yeah. So this corner I call the pointy corner, and this is prominent on the Vermilion kits.
Okay.
But this, to me, this corner is like I'll say like a Xerax feature, I'll call it. So I wanted to make sure I incorporated that existing feature, even though it's a different house, So
Yes.
there's a few things that you'll see that you'll think, oh, I recognize that from, because it's Xerax,
Yeah, so you're talking like the 45-degree transition into the 22. Is that
Yeah, yeah, with the sticky out spiky bit. Yeah, that's why I call it the spiky corner.
the pyramid on top, the pyramid cone?
Yeah, you know. So that to me is a Xerax thing.
Yeah, a tell.
So yeah, so I wanted to make sure that that transitioned across to the other houses that I was doing the kits for. Just small things like that.
Hmm.
There's obviously a few other small bits, but nothing. I'll say nothing. That's probably the most prominent thing. Is there's that corner, and then there's the I'll call it like the 90-degree corner. But that's obviously most factions have some form of 90-degree corner. So yeah, there's bits that I wanted to make sure would be in keeping with the other houses in terms of the Xerax. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Let's double back and look at the Ravagers. Tell me a little bit about them and some of the decisions.
so
Say let's take a look at the wait for everything to spawn in.
so when I kind of thought I'd like to build my own faction, and I wanted it to be different in essence in terms of the lore and history to the other factions. So before I built anything, I kind of sat down and I wrote up a bit of lore about how I thought they would be, and then I asked for some advice from some other guys in the community to proofread it, and then based on the feedback, essentially most of the first version went in the bin because it was too samey in that sense to other houses, other factions, sorry. So I kind of, some of it I went back to the drawing board on. So essentially the Ravagers are, I'll say like space Vikings is the best way to describe them. So
Okay.
even though it might seem slightly odd, so if you look at the Vikings in history, they had their sailing ships and they had some ornate head on the front, that kind of thing, amongst some other, yeah. So for me, most of the Ravager ships have got an animal head on, or as best as I could simulate an animal head. So the predominant clan in the Ravagers faction is the wolves. So you'll see more wolf heads than anything else. But then
Okay.
you've got the bear, the raven, the skull, which represents death, and so four. There's a fifth one. Oh, snake. Sorry, yeah, it's the fifth one's the snake. And in each one is meant to represent a different god that they believe in. The same as the Vikings believed in several different gods. So that's where that kind of stems from. But
Yeah.
I chose animals.
So
And then
I have the bear and I have the wolf. I don't know if I've got
yeah,
a snake or the other.
so the snake is more prominent in a few POIs.
Oh, okay.
The raven, I think there's only maybe one kind of freighter, and then there's a couple of skull ships, but you can see it more in some of the POIs because essentially each clan is different in its own right. So even unlike Xerax, where you have a different, Xerax has the 6 houses, which in terms of configs, each house is its own faction. Sorry, yeah, hang on, that makes sense. So if you look at Xerax, each house is its own faction in that sense in terms of config,
Mm-hmm.
and they all make up the Xerax. So obviously the game only has so many slots for factions spare. So even though Ravagers is one faction config wise, in terms of the faction itself, it's split into clans, which make up the faction as a whole, which is all explained in the lore and the history of how, you know, they came to be and ended up eventually with a sense of global governance, and each clan has a chieftain, and the chieftains form the council in that sense that is in charge of the faction as a whole. But yeah, so Wolf is the predominant clan in terms of the faction itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how because some people are like, oh, that's really weird. I've not seen any other ships with animal heads, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, that explains why.
That's
Uh,
that's cool though. I mean, it gives its unique characteristic. It's
yeah,
a major tell for this faction.
yeah, and some of the POIs are more prominent with it as well. Especially like the main temples on the homeworld for each clan, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, the hardest one to do was the snake, to have like the body of the snake, I'll say, curl round the POI and then come up with the head on the roof. That was the hardest one to do.
Do, do you,
that
do
that that took a bit
yeah.
of work to get it
You
right.
have that one in your library?
That should actually be in the game. Oh God, what's it called? Hang on. The problem is, because I end up building quite a lot of POIs, is I periodically have to muck out my blueprints because Lupus Temple, it'll be is BA Rav something Temple Prime. Lupus is a wolf. Temple Prime spare. Oh, Snake Temple Prime. There you go. That's original. Base. Is this going to crash my game? Now, why would you do that? Okay.
Interesting.
I can't access the game blueprints.
Neither can I. Okay. Wow, that's strange.
Yeah. So I can't access it at the moment now.
Multiplayer for the
Because
win.
yeah. So because I do a lot of POI building and everything else, I end up having to periodically, I'll say, muck out my blueprint library because it gets to the point where even the library itself gets too clogged up or too laggy to load. And I think in Reforged a couple of times I've tried to access a blueprint and forgot myself and actually crashed the game, or it kind of freezes up and takes about 10 weeks to do anything. So I just Alt F4, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the temp they're called it's essentially Temple Prime, which are homeworld only ones. So there's the snake, the wolf, the raven, the bear, etc. But yeah, the snake one was the more interesting one because I tried to make it look like it was curled around the temple with the head coming over the top. But they're all in the game, so you should be able to find them in the blueprint library in that sense. You know, these ships you pulled from the workshop, so
yeah.
they're obviously either player conversions of the NPC ships, or I built the player version first and then converted it to an NPC. It varied. I can't remember which way round, depending on the build.
I got you. So I'm over here at this Tavera that has been converted into a SV.
Yeah.
Have you used this thing? Have you tried?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
No, I haven't. I haven't used it in you know. I obviously I've tried to fly it around in single player without having to worry about. I'll say I haven't used it legitimately. Let's say that, because obviously it's quite expensive in small quantums.
Oh yeah, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. But that was a hold my beer moment. That how that came about through a hold my beer moment. That did. So
Okay.
yeah. So obviously on the workshop, I gave full credit to Vermilion because essentially I took his Tavera. I took his Tavera with the magic of console commands, made it an SV, and then went through and essentially had to make it a legal SV, but then also make it usable as an SV. Because if you've been inside a full-size Tavera, obviously you couldn't fit the 3 or 4 floors in a full-size Tavera in that Tavera.
Right.
So there's some creative adjustment, I'll call it, for that. But from the outside, it looks like a baby Tavera, yeah. And I tried to match up the weapons wherever I could in that sense. So that was more of a hold my beer kind of fun little build, because the conversation came up about I can't remember who it was now, but there was a group of us talking in the Discord, and somebody said, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if there was an SV version of the Tavera you could go around and scare players with?" Yeah, so that's how that came about.
That
So
sounds
that was a fun little build, to be fair. Yeah, to try and emulate the CV into an SV form in that sense.
yeah.
And that's, if you ever do that, you can then really see the difference in how some things, physically won't fit inside in that sense, like the number of floors, or, you know, some things are obviously blockwise, some things will only fit in a CV or a base and they don't have an SV version in that sense, you know.
Things
But
map.
no, that was fun to build, or
Yes.
and convert in that sense.
It's massive even as an SV. It's a giant one.
Yeah, yeah. But that is purely through the magic of console commands that it went from CV to SV. So that is how the game rescaled it.
So you sort of did that with the jewel here too. The
Uh, the Jewel is a bit different if you're referring to the combat CV to the carrier.
well, yeah, from the combat CV, and then you did a combat SV variant. Presume you
Oh, yeah,
converted.
yeah, that, yeah. So I took the empty shell of the combat. So the combat CV is essentially a crushed down version of the carrier. And then I took the shell of the combat CV and converted that to an SV. And what most people don't realize is I actually outfitted the entire interior of that SV in survival.
Oh wow! Come on now.
Yeah.
Why?
Well,
Well, that's my
well,
first question.
purely because I needed to be online at the pit stop to make sales and do bits and bobs.
Okay.
And then while I was going through quiet times, I had this out the back, and I was actually going and working on it bit by bit, and obviously then saving it. And then if I was, so I could flick back and forward between survival and creative if I needed to.
Yeah.
But I did do a lot of the interior in survival. Obviously, not completely legitimately in survival, but I was on a server at the same point, so you know, I may or may have not had God mode on at certain points, but that doesn't really help you much in survival, other than the fact it means you haven't got to worry about dying, and you haven't got to worry about, you can go through walls. But
Yeah.
outside of that, you know, if you put something down by mistake, you've still got to multi-tool it up. You can't just keyboard remove block it, with another block kind of thing. in that sense.
Thing might be a beast in Reforged Eden too. A lot of steel. You get this midsection cockpit, so there's a lot of
Yeah,
cushion in the nose.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So again, in essence, that is like I'll say the dual range because you got the carrier, the combat ship, and the SV. Although to be fair, I haven't found a hangar that SV will fit into on because of the width. You know, that won't fit through a hangar door.
Yeah.
So you'd have to come up with some intricate blast door method if you wanted to put it inside a hangar.
So I'm over here looking at the Arc Slayer.
Yeah.
It's a beauty. I like that you've so is this ground up yours, or was there some inspiration from?
So there was a little bit of inspiration from something Hecken had already built or had part built. There was something he'd already part done. There's also a little bit of inspiration from Script because they also worked on a ship together. I can't remember, is it the Scimitar or was it something else? I'm pretty sure they'd already worked on a ship together for either Ark or Wastelanders or something else, but they did a ship together. So there's some design elements from both of them. Then there's some of my own design aspects. And then obviously the skull on the front. And the other thing with the skull is it's the same skull for Ravagers, the god of death.
Yeah.
But again, if you read the lore and history, it's now because if you don't know about the faction, you can go to the homeworld and learn about their history. So I don't really want to give away too many spoilers. But essentially now ARC do help, I'll say, build and supply Ravagers with some of their ships,
Okay.
or have helped with some of their ship designs. So there are a couple of the shipyards where you'll go in and you'll be a little bit surprised because you'll go into a shipyard and you'll go into a room and all of a sudden it will look like an ARC room,
Hmm.
but that's just for the RP value to make it fit in with the story of the faction.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and that's again why some of those design aspects carried over to the Ravagers, like the similarity with the wings, for example. And
How
there is actually a Ravager refit of the Slayer.
oh how long did it take you to make the Gloriana?
Uh, all in or just the hull?
Ooh, we'll stay all in.
Okay, so if this is the Mark II, this is the upgraded version. So I think the hull to the point where I was happy with it, probably around on and off, probably, not solid, but if I say maybe 2 weeks for the hull,
Hmm.
another 3 or 4 days with texturing, and then maybe what's that? I don't know, maybe about 6 weeks all in. As a semi-educated guess, but that's not solid. That's on and off.
Yeah.
So normally, so in this case, like with this one, I obviously, and I did it with the Jarul as well. So I'll build the ship. I'll say I know Spange has block limits off, so you can have as many quants as you can farm. But I do try and stick to the 10-10 rule because I know some servers have that on. So like I essentially, although this one probably needs more quants than 10, but I essentially try and build it so there's enough room internally for the upgrade potential. Depending on how you want your shield layout and how many shield bits you want. Obviously this one's a bit difficult with the turrets because of the whole aspect of and the design of the ship. So this would be more of a broadsider than anything.
That's interesting. You
Um,
don't typically see too many broadsiders, but that's kind of conducive to a 40k build, isn't it? Having some
yeah,
broadsides.
yeah. So I've tried to keep some of that 40k influence there in that respect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then obviously from this, the Mark 1 is essentially this, but stripped down to 2.1.
Okay.
So then, you can bring that in if you wanted to, and upgrade it yourself and refit it yourself as you see fit. Whereas this, essentially, you can spawn it in, stick your Onsers and Quants in if and away you go. If you wanted that, weapon layout and everything else. So that's with that one anyway. I don't usually release. Normally, I don't release like an upgraded version. If I'm releasing a 2.1, I don't. This is one of the rare occasions where I've actually released both. Like with the Nimitz, that's a 10.7, but there isn't a 2.1 mil version, and there isn't even a vanilla version of that. I did start to make a vanilla version of the Nimitz, and then got kind of slightly aggravated with the container extenders and parked it.
Hmm.
Because obviously in vanilla you've only got 320 storage, whereas obviously Reforged you got 640. So in the I can't even say the word. In the obviously part of the hangar bay in the back of that is asymmetrical, so that means the containers are are not symmetry in the back. So then trying to reduce them down to 320, proved a little challenging, we'll say. So
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's on the workshop. That's got a lot of. Randall featured it in two of his videos. The first one he featured it, and then the second one he recapped because he didn't do the red alert mode in the first video mainly. So I thought, well, it's had loads of publicity. It's been featured in his workshop videos, which big thanks for that. And it spent a little while in the top 6 on the workshop for the week, and then it sat for a while as most popular for 3 months, and then just recently it got bumped down because obviously newer stuff or comes along and replaces it in terms of statistics.
Yeah.
So
So the Chieftain APC here, this is kind of gives me some T14 vibes. I don't know if you're familiar with that sort of tank, but that's kind of the aesthetic I look at when I see it.
so the Chieftain is actually built on a Panther 5 shell,
Oh, okay.
which is part of my I built like 12 or 15 tank shells, but I put them all on one kit. So it's actually originally the Panther 5 shell, but then it's got a little bit of a 40k element in there. A bit of somebody said like the bulldozer blade is a bit Mad Max.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's for me it was purpose built as a player carrier. It's not. It's clearly not packing as much firepower as the Eradicator, for example.
Clearly.
The Eradicator is a I'm going to end your base tank, whereas the challenge the Chieftain is a I can have up to 14 of my mates in there. We're gonna wait for the other guys to defang it, and then we're gonna rock up on foot. We're gonna rock up out the front and all pile out and start running it kind of thing.
Right.
That's but the Chieftain um predominantly came about because of like some of the server events I was doing in the campaign, where there's been times where players have wanted to take part, but they say don't have their own combat ship, or they don't have well, in this case obviously ground POIs. So say they wanted to help come and run a sector command, but they didn't have combat SVs. So it's like, well, you can still come and take part. Just come here, all meet here, pile in the Chieftain. When the other guys have took the shields down and defanged it, we can go rock up out front, and then you can get out and all pile in and start running the POI kind of deal. It's for those kind of scenarios in that sense. Because there aren't many other cases where you're going to have 14 people rammed in one build. Let's be fair. And it's more. That's why it was more aimed at. Was more for player numbers in server events. In the case of a HV, I did plan on doing an SV version, but another faction on the server built built a transport SV that, to be fair, actually looks like an American yellow school bus, which is quite funny. But essentially, they took care of the SV side of that, so I never bothered to build a transport SV for, you know, excuse me, those kind of numbers.
So you have the Eradicator, and then you have a Eradicator construction set.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, well, I hadn't seen anybody else do it. So the Eradicator construction. So I built the Eradicator, and then I was thinking about variants. So like obviously the kit, you've got the base tank in there, no weapons on it, the main body, and then you've got two turret variants. You got the single gun layer and then the twin gun layer, and then the same with the side turrets. You've got the four weapons and then the two. Excuse me, depending on how you want your loadout essentially. And then obviously I thought, well, looking at, I'll say modern day tanks, some of them have, I'll say bulldozer blades. Some of them have the spiky things for mine clearance. So that's how the different blade variants came about. And then I thought, well, somebody might like the shape of the tank, but may not actually like, I'll say my aesthetics or my internal layout. So that's why when I did the kit, I basically included a blank empty hull. So somebody could take that and make their own variant, So it just opens up more build opportunities for people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you have got this 12 vehicle set.
Mm-hmm.
So that the Chieftain is based on, where is it? The Panzer 5.
Hold on. I gotta take this challenge here. I gotta try and name off of these tank silhouettes. All right, I'm gonna start at the bottom right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's gonna be a T-34.
Yeah.
Now, is that an 85 variant? I think
Let's not complicate the issue. We'll just leave it as a T-34 because
Alright.
I know there's a subtle difference between that and the 85 variant, as you call it, but without having them side by side for comparison, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Okay, so the next one here, this is the Land Cruiser. Mistaken. British tank. Is it Mark II?
Maybe it's obviously a World War One tank, so
Right. Yeah, I think
British World War One tank. Yeah, I don't know. In essence, I took it from a few pictures on the internet, so there might not be a true mark in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's called the Land Cruiser, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Next one's going to be a Churchill.
Yeah.
And this, I'm not sure.
It's a universal carrier.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. That's British. That's British. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Little British World War II universal carrier.
Okay. That one works for me. Okay. So, then we have an M113.
Yeah.
Then we have a Ferdinand, also known as an Oliphant.
Yeah.
And then we have a. I do believe that this is a Bradley.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then we have a I don't know if that's it can't be an Abrams.
Yeah. No, it's an Abrams.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right. Let's see what the this would be like a I think this is like post Iraq War where you just learn like you got the catch cage here for RPGs and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Is it the something 1A2 Tusk or something? Some
Okay,
variant.
the Tusk.
Something.
Okay.
It's meant to be that variant.
Okay, and then after that we have a Tiger.
Yeah.
And definitely can tell by the turret and the back of the tank.
Yeah.
Real good capture on that, the blockwork there.
Yeah.
This is a is it what is it, a T1?
That's meant to be the Panther 5.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Which is when you look at it now, you'll see the comparison between that and the chieftain.
Yeah. Kind of looks like that might be like a T1. That's where the U.S. forces, U.S. military maybe got their inspiration from that.
Yeah.
After that, we got a Stug,
Yeah.
and finally we have a Challenger, if I'm not mistaken.
That's actually meant to be a leopard
A Leopard. That's it. I get the
or
two
leopard 2.
confused. Damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the turret. All right. Okay. Yeah, the turret, because the turret isn't like a slope that stays consistent. It actually has like the downward angle from the center line of the turret, which seems counterintuitive because it seems like it would direct shells down to the hull. Like
Yeah.
if somebody fired at it from the front, it would ricochet and deflect down into the hull. Yeah, well, I got most of them.
Yeah.
I'm fine. I'll live with that. Then you have a bigger variant of the Stug over here.
That is actually the Stug shell. It's just reworked in essence and I'll say outfitted for reforged.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, bringing it as a 9 core can be upgraded a bit further in terms of shield and CPU and additional weapons and stuff. But I I think you might struggle to make that a 10-10 personally,
yeah.
unless you went like completely wild on it.
And then we have a Ravagers with this battle tank.
Yeah. So Excalibur featured that in one of his videos. I can't remember which one. I think it might have been one of the monthly challenges a while back.
Yeah.
I did say Excalibur, didn't I? Yeah. Yeah, Excalibur featured that. I think it was in one of the monthly build challenges anyway, because he took one of the teeth out of the front and put in the flame.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I remember that now. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was featured in that video because he put the flame in it because it doesn't have the flame on it, and I think he like then or somebody said about Game of Thrones or something, and then yeah, but that's yeah, so that was actually built as a player build, but aimed at the Ravager faction in terms of design. So
It's a lot of firepower.
yeah, you know.
Very nice. And then what uh, what armor would be complete without the ability to move the tanks around? So we have our tank lifter here.
Yeah, so that stems from the fact that so I wanted to move my Eradicator without using my carrier, and obviously because it's quite a big tank, you need essentially a large hangar. I think you need something with a 13x7 door to fit it through, and obviously some ships don't have a hangar door that big. I tried to do an SV variant, but it required more CPU than I cared to spend on it for the sake of like just moving a tank around quicker
Yeah.
than trying to drive it across, half the planet. So, yeah, that's how the tank lifter was born. It's basically built intentionally. Originally, it was intentionally built to carry my Eradicator around on planet. Um, but then it's also obviously come in handy for other things in that sense. Like logistics between like moving say a tank between your space station and your base and a carrier or ultimately because the Eradicator is a pretty big tank, it means that things like the Stug there will fit on it because they're slightly smaller, so that's also a bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm typically not building anything as far as like a tank. I don't build too big on that.
Yeah.
Something like the Eradicator would be like my upper limit of scale.
Yeah,
Even
well that's the biggest tank I think I've built
yeah.
is the Eradicator, but that's purely because of that's purely because it is essentially meant to be a 10-10. I'm going to end your POI on my own kind of tank.
Right.
To a point, obviously, I wouldn't try and solo a sector command with that. I don't think that would end too well with any tank, to be fair. But you kind of get the point. You know,
Yeah.
I think I've soloed a Xerax drone base with it and the surrounding defenses, and not even stepped out of the tank and killed everything. So I think in that, you know, and that's a 10-10. So I think if I can wipe out a drone base at a 10-10 with a 10-10 on my own, that means I'm fairly comfortable using it up to, I'll say, POIs of that strength. You know.
So you have the SAS dry dock over here. Is this sort of like a maintenance depot?
Yeah, so it's a space build. So essentially, you can park SVs and CVs in it that will fit. You can add lights, and it's essentially like a little dry dock in space for, originally obviously for the Scavenger Alliance SAS abbreviation that Spange came up with as a player faction, which is some of the other builds are or tied to that. And obviously they were originally built for vanilla, so there's the dry dock, there's a couple of space stations, a few planet POIs, the Reaper, I think, is that the Reaper? Yeah, the Reaper beside it, and then a couple of other smaller bits and bobs. But yeah, essentially it's a dry dock in space, but it's an easy refit. I have done a respray and a slight refit for Reforged for the pit stop crew that I use personally. I can fit my refitted hero in there nicely. So in that sense, it's handy if you want to work around it on a 360 perspective without just, you know, floating in space, so to speak.
Yeah. I feel like they could come in clutch with uh Reforge Eden 2 because I feel like the some like temporary or maybe inexpensive repair station builds are going to be a thing. You know,
Yeah,
something you can drop down and you can imagine fighting a prolonged fight with Silvera, you know, dipping in and out, getting a couple repair sessions in. I think that's going to be a
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
So flank station over here. This is 40K. If I'm
yeah.
not
That's
mistaken.
another 40k. Yeah, it's another 40k inspired build. So there's actually two versions of this. There's the player workshop version, which is what you've got here, and then there's the POI version, which is currently exclusively on Spange's Broken Eden server in a I'll call it a community system in that sense.
Yeah.
So, but that the POI version essentially was only built for that purpose, you know.
Okay.
So yeah, this is a player build. This was fun, but also challenging to build, as you can imagine, because A, I'm trying to simulate some 40k build, but B, some of the angles were not fun to deal with.
Mhm. Yeah. If
But
you
I'm ultimately pleased with how it turned out in the end result.
right. If you're trying to do like hallways and stuff like that at the 45-degree angle, it can get tricky at times.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very cool. Let's see here. Actually, we could swing by and take a look at the Nimitz. So, how much time would you say you have invested in the Nimitz?
Oh Jesus. So if you just from my side of the build, I would say probably around 3 to 4 months.
Oh, wonderful.
I spent a long time on this build, and that's not including, you know, unless you're doing the LCDs and the signal logic and you know, fitting it in and lining all the LCDs up and all that. I'm just on about from my point of the build. It was about 3 to 4 months I
Yeah.
invested in this. I spent 2 days painting the hull without symmetry on.
Really?
Yeah, just to give it that, I'll say, that
That's
patchy steel plate look at a distance.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay. Uh, manually curated each texture. Very nice.
Yeah, and then obviously you find you paint a section of it with the different shades of grey and off white, and then you come out and you're like, oh, that doesn't look quite right. So then you go back in and make some tweaks, and then come out and do it again. And then obviously some of it needed retweaking when I then added in some more of the block detail on the hull. So I then had to make some more tweaks. So yeah, like I say, I spent 2 days painting the hull essentially.
And then you save it, you clear pivot, respawn it in, and realize that all the work you've done has been scrambled.
Yeah,
Did
I mean,
that happen for you?
not on this one. I think I was lucky with this one. It didn't
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned that lesson the hard way.
Yeah. So yeah, this is what I mean. Because so this started out. I planned this was going to be my sorry, Mona Lisa build, and it turned into the Sistine Chapel by the time we finished. It was way more than either of us anticipated, and Alessia's done absolutely amazing work on those LCDs.
Yeah. Change the lighting here. She's a beauty. Have you used her in game yet?
I tried her out in single player, but not on multiplayer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've taken her for a lap of the galaxy in single player, as a 10-7 to see what it was like in that sense. But for me, it was more. This is more to look at in essence. Obviously it's functional and you can use it in game, but for me, this was more of a, this is a thing of beauty. Look at it, in that sense. Which again is difficult to pull off if you want something that looks good but also is functional in game to the point that it works and isn't gonna get you killed the first time you try and fight like a Sunnet in it or something.
Right, right.
But yeah. But because I wanted this one to be my I'll say final RE1 build, I wanted it to be a little bit special in that sense.
Yeah, this is definitely a build you can get lost in.
Yeah. So there's there's the 4 lifts off the hangar to either side, and
Ooh.
essentially they all go up to the main floor, which then has the lift to the bridge. But essentially they all you can get lost in it, but essentially like the corridors, link back on themselves. So if you go, say, out of the lift on the left side and go down the left side of the ship, then you curve around the front, come back up the right side, and you're back to a lift.
I like
So
what you did with the hydroponics. It's really cool looking. The blockwork.
yeah, so there's some Randall influence there as well, with the some of the block work and
Yeah.
and the layout. Like I say, I used his color palette. I credited him for the design aspects in that sense. Some of them I hadn't seen before on another build, which I thought were pretty cool. And some of them I thought, well, he's built some cool Star Trek ships. I'm building a Star Trek ship. If they're both Federation ships, maybe there should be a bit of continuity there, even if they're by different builders.
Mm-hmm.
That's where some of the thought process was in some of the bits in there, and like using the same color palette, for example.
Oh yeah. Let's see here. Bridge top exit. May or may not be lost. Okay, wait a minute, I got it. It's a core room. Okay. Well. Oh yeah, here we go. All right, I got to the bridge finally. A little bit of a detour. Yeah, the LCDs, man, they definitely they pull you into the universe. Really,
Yeah,
really helps to sell the ship. So good work on Alessi's part. Really nice.
yeah. Like I say, all those LCDs, that's all Alessia. You know, in places I might have put an LCD in place and said, you know, like med bay or labeled the room, so to speak, but it was a simple label as a place marker. And then, you know, he did the rest. So,
So, which Star Trek series would you say is your favorite?
probably Picard era, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Next Generation.
Yeah, Next Generation with Picard, and then obviously the new Picard series on Amazon. I quite enjoyed that as well.
Okay.
So yeah, Picard era, I think.
Very beautiful ship. Nice clothes. Good texture on the outside. Now, I don't. So some of the like. So have you played Star Trek Online?
Briefly,
Yeah.
very briefly, like once, I think. I basically went through the little tutorial bit and then got onto multiplayer because a couple of the guys were already playing and wanted me to play, and then I got to the point of being on multiplayer, and then like, oh no, we're bored, we're gonna go play something else. You know, so I never really got very far with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a lot of designs from there. Really good inspiration.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of um, even images, you know, from things like that. If you go and search for like Star Trek Online ships or whatever, you know, you can pull up some great images for referencing purposes as
Yeah.
well. So
Uh, you have anything within your library you want to share with us?
I've got a couple of capital cities if you want to have a look.
Sure.
Yeah, just obviously, I assume you're going to edit this, but uh, have you got any more questions to ask?
Oh, that's no, that's essentially it. Um,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. It's only because you know,
Uh,
no offense to you. Obviously, time is marching for
yeah, yeah,
me.
yeah.
BA. I should have just wrote capital, shouldn't I? Capital. So what we got? 0x capital C. So this is a 0x capital.
And we're okay to show this.
Yeah, yeah. This is fine. I posted pictures in Discord of this.
Okay. Oh, this is sweet.
So this is for vanilla. This is a combination of Vermilion's build kit, which obviously I gave him credit for. There's a couple of little bits of the design aspect from Sector Command, but for obviously, you know, this is vanilla, so obviously it's not Sector Command. The very crushed down, smaller version of the upper part of the Council of Eldars, which is the Fleet HQ, to kind of bring the different POI bits, if you kits and bits, if you like, together into one to form the capital.
Yeah.
So you've got the spaceport slash distribution area, which is in between the landing pads. The single height building. You've got the very small building in the corner that looks like the very top of a Xerax pyramid, I call it. In there is the zones trader. Now the zones trader is I'll say place marker for a faction specific trader that has faction only items. So where that's going, obviously with the Xerax, I'm not sure, but there are certain builds that will have these zone traders in them that I know are for faction specific items in vanilla purpose, you know.
Yeah.
Little comms tower. These other little single and double height habitat modules are exactly habitat modules slash living quarters. Then you've got the building down with the fake road vehicle that Vermilion built. I'll call it a road vehicle. You know, it's part of the convoy and inside some of the sets of command and stuff. So the building to the right there, that's a mix of like hospital, storage, administration. This building opposite it is the Fleet HQ, which I say is essentially identical to the very top part of the Council of Elders on the homeworld, with obviously some adjustments internally. You know,
Oh, this is cool.
this is meant to represent the Fleet HQ.
Yeah. It's interesting. I didn't think to use that block as a banner. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So there's a couple of the POIs I've done where I've actually used that block shaping for banners from the ceiling in that sense. And then the big building in the center is again meant to be the main government building. So again, there's office space, you know, meeting room. This is admin cord, so you wouldn't be able to blow it up in game
Okay.
in that sense, you know,
Yeah.
because it's a one-off feature POI. And there are traders here as well. You got the zones trader. There's the spaceport trader. There's a medic in there as well. There's an info trader, either in the main building or the fleet HQ. Yeah. So there's each Xerox has a variant of this. Obviously, some are not this intricate because this is meant to be on the homeworld, whereas the other ones are like, I'll say, smaller capitals in comparison. So yeah, this is a Xerox one that will be on the homeworld in essence. That's the plan. And then obviously I did the Ravagers, the Brotherhood of Far, Arc, 6 Xerox, Ravagers, Brotherhood of Far, Arc, Pren. But I can't. Yeah, so yeah, there's 10. Yeah. So Pren is the only one that isn't submitted yet.
Okay.
There might be another one, but I can't remember now. But yeah, so obviously some of these have had LCD work done by Alessia as well. So like there's a couple of versions. The Brotherhood, Ravagers, and the Arc one all have like street maps. So you'll go to a point in the city and there'll be like an LCD street map, you know, like a 3D street map, and it'll say you're here, and then it'll have the outlines for the buildings, and you know, it
Oh,
corresponds to. Yeah, they're really cool. They are really cool. The Ravagers one might actually already be in the blueprint library. I'd have to go and double check. But yeah, you know, so if you see some of these builds and you think, oh, that's really cool LCDs, that's Alessia's work. So, you know,
hmm. This is wonderful, man.
yeah. So this is obviously meant to be another unique POI that you could come and visit if you're at the Xerox homeworld in that sense. So that's where in vanilla it's nice. You know, there's something unique to go and see on a homeworld. Which is why, like I said, I tried to make each capital different in that sense, even within the Xerox, you know.
Yeah.
So even if each house or faction has its own fleet HQ, they will obviously be built around the build style and aesthetics for that faction. And the city layouts I've tried to make different for each one as well. So it's not like a copy paste layout of each city, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whether you're in Villainer or Reforged, if you haven't seen them, I would say go to the Xerox homeworld and have a look at the council and the palace. I know Raccoona covered them in vanilla in a playthrough, in a vanilla playthrough he did a little while ago. Because I sometimes, you know, I think, and this isn't just with Xerox, this is a generic thing. I think sometimes players don't necessarily realize that the buildings are even there because they've never visited that location. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I'd think there'd be something in the PDA to kind of, highlight that or something.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Whether that's coming down the road or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
In vanilla purposes, anyway. So
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be nice if it was mentioned in the PDA, as you say. That would be a good pointer. Or there was some reference to it, say in the start system or something.
Right.
Or you hear a rumor about it at a trade station or something, that kind of thing. Because as we know, not everybody reads the PDA. Well,
Yeah.
I don't, not
Yeah,
everybody
I'm
reads.
guilty. I'm guilty.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
all are, to be
Yeah.
fair. Because even I've gone, oh, what's this? And someone's gone, it's in the PDA. Oh, okay. I'll be quiet and go read. Or how do you do this? Oh, well, it's on the
Yeah.
it's in the console command documentation. Because you either but we as because obviously like as a server admin I deal with support tickets and stuff sometimes. So there are occasions where you get things, people will ask things, and it's like it's in the PDA or it's in the Imperiopedia or however you pronounce that.
Hmm.
And I've seen Ravian comment as well about did you read such and such. and then people will chirp in and say nobody reads, what are you talking about? It's like, it seems like it's a generic ongoing joke. So yeah, but no, I get what you mean. It would be nice if there was some reference to these things somewhere in as you say, in this case in the PDA or in Imperiumpedia or however you pronounce that. So yeah.
Oh, that's
So
fine.
yeah, the capitals are coming for vanilla. I don't know when they'll actually be added, but they were submitted a little while ago now. So I think Hummel does. I'll call it batch adding.
Okay.
He'll wait till they. I think he'll. Because obviously they're working on other things, but I think essentially he'll wait till there's a pile of submissions, and then he'll go through and clear the backlog, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. Well, this has been a very well, honestly, it's just kind of a scratching the surface of some of the work you've done. Again, there's other
Yeah.
capitals and uh, 14 pages of builds, so it was kind of hard being choosy about what I should spawn in and you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
any last words for the audience?
Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for asking me to do this interview. I feel quite privileged in that sense because outside of my little bubble of people, I do interact with other people, but it's a bit different to be
Yeah.
actually being interviewed in that sense. Um, yeah, so I guess enjoy the game. That's what we're here for, is to enjoy the game.
Right.
And if you're a builder and you want to improve and learn new things or improve your building, I'll call it, then I always say either ask or you know download something from the workshop and essentially cut it up and learn how people have built stuff. Not necessarily saying copy it, but I find you can learn a lot from other people.
Yeah.
you know yeah, so that would be my you know my final thing, I guess, is thanks for the interview, thanks for listening.
Oh yeah, no worries, man. Again, I know
Yeah.
you're behind the scenes pulling strings on making content for factions and
Yeah.
various other contributions. So just wanted to get that highlighted.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
um Obviously at the moment I'm taking a bit of a break from POI building because I'm actually playing a
Hmm.
season. But
Yeah.
once that season ends, I will go back and I'll finish some of the stuff I've started and get it submitted and go from there, and then I'll see what's around the corner to build next, essentially. For for vanilla in terms of NPC faction content, and once Reforged 2 is at the point where I pick it up and have a play and explore the aspect of that as well. So you know there's also a lot of new stuff coming, isn't there?
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that overall I feel that regardless of which Discord you hang out in, generally there's a lot of really helpful, friendly, nice people in the I'll say the Imperium community as a whole, because I know, not everybody hangs out in Anvil, and not everybody hangs out in the official Discord, and not everyone hangs out in Spanges or in HWS.
Right.
There's obviously loads of others probably, but they're the main four I think of off the top of my head. So even though people might hang out in different places, we obviously still all have love for the game.
Yeah. Family. We're family.
Yeah, yeah. Even this long after its initial release. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. I, that's how I look at it. Is like everybody's family. It's just not that big of a community, honestly, to be kind of split on some things. Just enjoy the game and enjoy the people that contribute to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if I find it's the same with regardless of where you go and play on the internet, if you find toxic people, they generally don't tend to last long in a community, or you can just always block them and ignore them.
Yeah.
But they seem a lot fewer in this community than in other places I've been. But yeah, so
All right. Wonderful, man. Thanks for stopping by and having an interview with me.
yeah,
uh,
thank you.
yeah. Okay. Well, that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning into this episode of Artists Behind the Art with Don2k7. Until next time, LyfeForce out. Hey, folks, if you enjoy my content, please consider becoming a patron today. As a patron, you gain access to exclusive builds not featured on the workshop, early access builds, as well as participate in a number of things, including polls, feedback, comments, suggestions, ideas, or anything you'd like to submit to current and future builds. If any of this appeals to you, please consider becoming a patron today. Link in the pinned comment below. Thank you.